Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody to 10 things school nurses and health office staff need to know about why we immunize. We are so happy that you are here today. We love school nurses and health office staff. We love all of the work that you do, and we hope this training is beneficial to you today. Just a few reminders. Please keep yourself on mute unless you're speaking. You can use the chat box to ask any questions. We have several people helping today with that chat box and answering any questions that they can. All of the videos, handouts, slides, everything will be available on our website after the training. So don't feel like you need to write anything down or try to capture anything. You do have access to it all on our website. Just for fun, if you want to put your school district that you are representing today in the chat, that would be great. It's fun to see people from all across Arizona and where you're working in. We had many people register for this training from lots of different counties across Arizona. So we're happy to see you all here today. Just a disclosure, presenters have no financial interest or relationship with the commercial supporters of this educational activity or the manufacturers of any commercial product and or providers of the commercial services discussed in this activity. We always have to say that, especially if we are offering CEUs. If you are a nurse, medical assistant, social worker, CEUs are offered, but you must attend 90% of the live training. So stick around through the end and we'll make sure to get your CEUs. In case everybody's not familiar with TAPI, I just wanted to introduce TAPI. It's the Arizona Partnership for Immunization. It's the statewide vaccine coalition. So our mission is to foster community wellness, advocate for good public policies, and best immunization practices. My name is Laura Smith. I'm the program manager of community education, and I do a lot of work with the school nurses. And you'll hear all of the ways that TAPI supports school nurses throughout the training today. So we are happy that you're here. We have a great lineup of presenters today. We have Nadine Miller, who is from Mesa Public Schools. She has a long history of being a school nurse and working in schools with parents. So we're happy to have her here answering questions with us. We also have Blake and Sharon from the Arizona Department of Health Services. They are who receives your IDR reports, and they are here to answer any questions that you have about the IDR. And then we have a special guest presenter today. Gail Hawk is a cervical cancer survivor and also an HPV vaccine advocate. So we are in for a real treat hearing what she has to say today. Okay. So the objectives of this training are to discuss science-centered, evidence-based concepts about why parents should vaccinate their children. We're going to answer common questions, address any misconceptions, and then also provide you with credible vaccine online resources for parents and colleagues that you can share. We really want participants to become knowledgeable on vaccine benefits, and help parents make the decision to vaccinate their children. We know you're kind of in a tough spot sometimes being in the school health office, and we want to offer you some support and resources to help you do your job. We love to give prizes at TAPI, and so we have several questions throughout the training today, quiz questions. So make sure you utilize the chat box for those. And we'll be picking winners and sending them a hat or a cup or a t-shirt. There's a few different prize options. So make sure to use that chat box. Okay. I want to show you a quick video about some things we have learned through vaccination.
I want to tell you about a time
in American history so that
it never repeats itself.
So it never repeats itself.
It was a harrowing time.
A heart-wrenching time.
I could hear my mother warn me, Seal, don't go out and play.
My family was ravaged.
Thousands and thousands died.
I was scared.
So scared.
And then one day,
And then one day, there was hope.
Before vaccines, there were few ways to help protect against deadly illnesses. Diseases like measles,
Meningitis,
diphtheria,
Hib,
whooping cough,
or polio, which killed my grandma's youngest son. Without vaccines, these threats can reemerge. I'm here
to tell my children to help protect their children.
Get your kids vaccinated and keep them on schedule.
I never want my grandchildren to see what I saw.
Okay. The real dilemma that we have to face is that because of the effectiveness of vaccines over the past 50 to 75 years, people have forgotten about the diseases those vaccines were developed to fight. It's a phenomenon called vaccine amnesia or public health amnesia, where a public health initiative such as vaccines is so successful that people forget how bad it once was. And then we can see things like measles cases start to pop up across the US. And we've had measles outbreaks here in Arizona as well. So it's really important that we remind people that vaccines work and they protect us. We need to make sure we're all caught up so we can keep our communities healthy. So the title of the training today is 10 things school nurses and health office staff need to know about why we immunize. So we're going to go through them. And reason number one is kids are at risk for disease. So this map shows exactly what we're talking about with the public health amnesia. Measles was thought to be eradicated in the year 2000, but in 2014, new cases started popping up in unvaccinated communities. Still later, years later, we see that in 2019, all of the states in dark blue reported at least one case of measles. So if you look and see how many states were dark blue, there are 28 states that experienced one measles case. I would be interested to find updated information and to see how many more states have seen measles since 2019. That's more than half of the states from a disease that we believe to be eradicated. So the problem still persists. The outbreaks are a direct effect of the lower rates of immunization. And even though we haven't seen a single case of disease in 14 years, that doesn't mean that it has gone away. Continued immunization is the only way to prevent these diseases long-term. Trends are showing that actually right now pertussis or whooping cough is beginning to recirculate. And I'm sure a lot of you know about whooping cough and have heard of that before. Arizona kids are especially at risk. So the Arizona Department of Health Services require every school to report once a year on coverage levels of kids enrolled in schools. This is called the Immunization Data Report or the IDR. And I'm sure you're all familiar with that. This information is made available to the public and parents can be informed about coverage levels. Our schools used to be at the 95% coverage rate, but over the last 5 to 10 years, the level of protection has begun to drop as the level of vaccine exemptions have begun to increase. Some schools now have only 40% coverage in Arizona. Arizona has been identified as a hot spot because of low coverage levels. Number 2, vaccine preventable diseases still exist. The data shows that diseases still exist and are circulating. However, if you haven't experienced these diseases, you can kind of fall into the trap of believing that they no longer exist or they'll probably never touch you personally. I want to show a video about why it's important to vaccinate both for ourselves and those in our community. It's kind of a difficult video to watch. I actually really don't like it very much, but it's an important message with this baby. So.
It's just kind of heavy. Uh-oh. There we go. Okay. It's okay. Okay, take a breath there, honey. Come on. Almost there. There we go. Oh my. It's okay. It's okay. Yeah. It's okay. Yeah. Okay, sweetie.
Okay, that's about all I can handle. So this baby has whooping cough or pertussis. And you can see this baby was too young to get immunized themselves. And so they really depend on those around them to get immunized. It's really hard to watch, but I think the impact is really important. And then this young man on the right, he has mumps. You can see his face is all swollen. So those are some vaccine preventable diseases. Okay, number 3, outbreaks are preventable when parents make the decision to vaccinate. The way we have traditionally prevented outbreaks was to keep 95% of the population immunized against disease. If 95% of people have immunity, the disease cannot spread throughout the community. It's also really important that our youngest kids are immunized before entering school to protect the community around them. It is referred to as herd immunity or community immunity. I'm sure you guys have heard that before. We're attempting to keep our communities healthy, and the best way to do that is to vaccinate. I think it's easiest to think about community immunity in terms of offense. So if you think about those of us with immunizations as kind of planks in a fence, and together, if enough of us are immunized, we can surround the person who is not immunized. That could be because they're too young or medically fragile, or an older adult that cannot get immunized. They are protected by the community immunity around them. When a disease comes up, it will hit the fence, and those immunized people will not get sick or be able to spread that disease, which protects the under-immunized. Outbreaks happen when there are too many holes in the fence, and then the disease just floats right through. Once it infects an unimmunized person, it puts all the other unimmunized people at risk. Number 4, we know that vaccines work. We want to make sure that you have evidence that vaccines work. Once you have a vaccine against a disease, we have been able to eradicate, eliminate, or decrease the number of cases to almost 0 after the vaccine has been introduced. I know this chart is a little bit small, but like I said, you'll have these slides if you want to refer back to them. So you can see here, smallpox, it was eradicated in 1980. It decreased by 100%. We also have polio eliminated in 1979. It decreased in 100%. We have seen some cases of polio start to pop up though recently. And you can kind of just go down the chart and see all of these diseases that were eradicated or eliminated by vaccines. Once a vaccine has been approved for use, it is still constantly tested and researched for safety and efficiency. These diseases go away because vaccines work. I love this fact that vaccines save an estimated 42,000 lives every year in the US alone, which is 3 times more than seatbelts and child restraints combined. So think about that for a minute. Choosing not to vaccinate a child is like putting them in a car with no seatbelt or child restraint. That may have happened when I was younger. You know, there weren't as such strict seatbelt laws, but now I have kids and I would never dream of putting them into a car seat and not buckling it or letting them not have their seatbelt buckled. Most of the time it probably would be fine. If, you know, how often do you really get into a car accident? Maybe you're only driving around the corner or a mile or two, but it only takes a single incident for a seatbelt or a child restraint to be worthwhile in saving your child's life. And just like that, it only takes a single exposure to a disease that you can't even see for your child to become ill with one of these diseases. And the long-term effects on their health can be very serious. That is if they survive. So vaccines are very important. Number 5, vaccines offer protection to us, sometimes in different ways. So vaccines protect us from getting the actual disease, but newborns who are too young to get vaccinated are first protected by their mother's vaccines. So this is first protection, but it does begin to wear off around 2 months of age. And that's why there's a schedule that starts when the baby is around 2 months old to continue on that protection. There are some people who cannot get vaccines. They're too sick or have allergies. These people are protected by those around them getting vaccinated, just like our fence analogy. And then just as a side note, I think it's important that you know that approximately 1 in 1 million people have a true allergic reaction to a vaccine. Sometimes people get swelling or a rash or start to feel sick and think that's an allergic reaction. But a true allergic reaction is severe and incredibly rare. The CDC has researched the best time to give vaccines to offer the maximum benefit. So we should follow the recommendations on the schedule that is constantly getting updated and monitored to make sure that it is current. One in 1 million children get a true allergic reaction to a vaccine. Number 6, vaccine antibodies act as personal ninjas to protect from the actual disease. So after someone gets a disease, it can take several months to years for their immune system to fully recover, leaving them vulnerable to other illnesses and disease. So it really is better to get the vaccine. The vaccine tells your body that it needs to equip itself against the disease if you're ever exposed to it. And then your body responds by creating a bunch of antibodies that are like ninjas, just waiting to fight off an exposure. You can see here on the right, 30 years ago, vaccines used 3,000 antigens to protect against 8 diseases. But as safety trials have gone on and things were updated, now vaccines today use only 300 antigens to protect against even more diseases, but 14 by age 2. Okay, that's a lot of talking for me, but here's a trivia question for you. Please put your answer in the chat and then we'll be reaching out to people to give them prizes. What vaccine is recommended during pregnancy? A, pertussis or Tdap, B is flu, C is COVID, D is RSV vaccine, or E, all of the above. Okay, lots of answers coming in. You another few seconds if you haven't answered already. Okay. So most people chose E, all of the above, which was correct. So currently recommended during pregnancy is the pertussis or Tdap, a flu vaccine if it is flu season, a COVID vaccine, and brand new is the RSV vaccine. It is recommended for pregnant women. Okay. Number 7, there are new recommendations focused on pregnant mothers that during pregnancy, the mother get a flu, pertussis, and COVID vaccine. And as of very recently, RSV vaccine. We should update this slide. It is important that you talk to your OBGYN or have the parents talk to the OBGYN about when and where to get these vaccines. And some people have all members of the household get vaccines to increase the protection for their newborn. Because these vaccines given during pregnancy are the baby's only line of defense until they can start getting vaccinated at 2 months. I had a baby in 2021 in January in the middle of COVID and flu season. And I got all my vaccines. The COVID vaccine was not available at that point, but I wish that it were. But I also had my kids get their flu vaccines because they were going, my older kids, they were going to school, they were bringing home all those germs. And really, we couldn't handle our kids getting really sick with the flu when having a brand new medically fragile baby in the house. So we all got our vaccines. We were able to kind of protect baby sister and make it through that season. Just a reminder that it is flu season, so your best defense against getting the flu is a flu shot. They are widely available, pharmacies, your doctor's office, all of that. If you do get the flu or talk to, or believe that you have flu-like symptoms, please talk to your doctor about getting tested for the flu or COVID. There are antiviral therapies that really will help shorten the recovery time. Okay, another trivia question. Can someone get a flu vaccine and a COVID vaccine in the same visit? A is yes, B is no, and C is not sure. Okay, I think everyone agrees. Yes, you can get a flu vaccine and COVID vaccine in the same visit. It's actually recommended. You can do it at the same time. Saves you a trip back to the pharmacy or to your doctor's office. Just get it done at once. Number 8, doctors and science support vaccination. All of these organizations support immunization as a strategy to keep kids healthy. So trust your healthcare provider. Their education, knowledge, and experience is what you can rely on when you have questions. They're also a great place to send parents if you get stuck on a question that they have about vaccines. So here we have the American Academy of Pediatrics, American Academy of Family Physicians, ACOG, ANA, CDC, March of Dimes, and we have our school nurses associations on there as well. So very happy to see all of these organizations and more strongly support protecting children with recommended vaccines. Number 9, this is where you all come in. Off to school, up to date on shots. It's important for kids to be up to date on shots because when they enter the classroom, they're in very close contact with many other children where diseases can spread rapidly. I don't know about the classrooms at your school, but my kids' school, there's a lot of kids in those classrooms and they're all breathing on each other and sharing pencils and, Chromebooks and all of that. So you don't want your child sick or bringing home a preventable disease, and that may expose a younger sibling or older adult that's perhaps under-immunized. Each state has their own requirements in terms of school entry and vaccines, so try to get familiar with the guidelines in your state. And the CDC website has information for all 50 states if you're unsure about what your specific requirements are. ADHS also has a lot of great recommendations, resources for you about school requirements. And Sharon, if you could just put in the chat the link to where they can find the school requirements for vaccines, that would be very helpful. Number 10, kids still need protection as they grow. We talk a lot about baby shots, but the same recommendations for vaccines continue throughout their life. We do recommend following the CDC schedule for immunizations. They are updated with new and improved vaccines as they come out. You can go to the CDC website to review the recommendations for yourself. They even have a printable vaccine schedule that's easy to use for your reference. TAPI also has those vaccine schedules available for you. Later on in the training, we'll go over materials that TAPI has for you and how to order them for your school. Those are all free materials and can be really great to pass out to families during flu season and respiratory illness season that is happening right now. Awesome, thanks for that link, Blake. That's great. And we will send this in the email with the link to the training too. Okay, this is a great video that talks about why vaccines work. It's a little bit long, it's 7 minutes, but it's a great foundation for understanding why vaccines work. Think about any questions you may have while we watch this video, and then we can answer some of those.
Orange, you glad you don't have scurvy? In 1747, in the first medical trial ever performed, Scottish physician James Lind found out that eating citrus fruits could cure scurvy. Now, today we know this works because citrus contains high levels of vitamin C. In fact, ascorbic acid, a common name for vitamin C, comes from the Latin for not scurvy. By issuing rations of lemon juice to sailors, the British Navy was able to pretty much eliminate the disease until the late 1800s, when polar explorers suddenly began to see scurvy again. The copper pots holding their lime juice had destroyed the vitamin C, but they were pretty confused. So despite James Lind's experiments 150 years before, citrus fruits became the enemy. And when Robert Falcon Scott set out to reach the South Pole in 1911, he carried the finest in canned meat products, biscuits, chocolate, tea, and zero vitamin C. A Norwegian team beat them to the pole by 5 weeks, and during their sad journey home, Scott and his team perished in a blizzard, sick and weak from what was probably scurvy. It had been so long since anyone had seen this disease, the British had forgotten how to prevent it. When we create such effective solutions, we can forget how serious the problems were. Thankfully, people today don't die of scurvy or polio. Since the introduction of Jonas Salk's polio vaccine in 1955, the disease has been nearly eradicated from the earth.
The thing to remember is that this is a continuous process.
Compare the 358 infections reported in 2014 to the 1940s, when 500,000 people per year were paralyzed or died from polio infections. Vaccines work. Our immune system is on constant alert against germy baddies, with millions of white blood cells each on the lookout for specific infections. When an immune cell meets its target, it replicates itself, and this clone army sends a barrage of protein weapons called antibodies to label the trash for cleanup. And after the infection is gone, so-called memory cells stick around, ready to mount a fast attack in case this germ shows up again. This is how we develop immunity, and it works pretty well, since we're all still alive. But even with all that, some super bad germs can take us out before our immune sentries have had time to call up their clone army. This is especially true for young children. Their immune systems are fresh out of basic training. Thankfully, we have vaccines, which are made of tiny pieces or weakened versions of viruses or bacteria. They let our immune system see what the bad guys look like and recruit those all-important memory cells before we ever have to actually see the real enemy. Thanks to vaccines, the US was able to eliminate measles in the year 2000. But in recent years, as more and more parents are refusing to vaccinate their children or are vaccinating them later than what doctors recommend, it's back. In most states, more than 90% of children are vaccinated, but that's not enough to keep a disease like measles at bay. In our episode about Ebola, we talked about a number called R0, the basic reproduction number for a disease, or the number of people infected by one person in a susceptible population. For Ebola, that number is low, but for measles, each sick person will infect up to 18 others. Luckily, vaccines can change that. The fraction of people who are vaccinated or immune can lower the reproduction number below 1, which means the disease is disappearing. 90% of unprotected people who come in contact with somebody who has measles, even just breathing the same air, will become infected. To control a super contagious virus like that, the vaccination rate has to be 95% or above. Now, right now, the US is lagging behind, and measles is making a comeback. The Guardian put together a simulation of just how this so-called herd immunity works. When enough of a population is vaccinated, even if it's not 100%, the herd can protect the unprotected. With vaccine refusal on the rise, our herd immunity is breaking down. Preventable diseases like measles and whooping cough have become our scurvy. Most of us don't know anyone with polio, and measles, it's not that bad, right? Well, yes, it is that bad. Before the age of vaccines, millions of people were killed by diseases that today are just bad memories. Vaccines have let us develop a sort of generational amnesia. Today, we expect our children to grow up healthy, and we're lucky that we don't appreciate just how dangerous these diseases are. Like science writer Seth Mnookin says, vaccines are victims of their own success. Because of stories like Andrew Wakefield's discredited study wrongly linking vaccines and autism, and the news media's obsession with pictures of crying, terrified children being poked with needles, people are nervous about vaccines. This anxiety isn't new, though. When Edward Jenner in 1798 saw that milkmaids didn't catch smallpox, he realized that because they'd been exposed to the similar cowpox disease, they were immune. And based on this, he developed an early smallpox vaccine by inoculating humans with the cow virus. In fact, the word vaccine itself has bovine origins. Still, as far back as 1802, critics were claiming that the smallpox inoculation would turn you into a cow. Vaccines don't come without risk. Nothing does. But on average, fewer than 1 in a million people will experience a dangerous reaction to common vaccines. Car accidents, playing outside, even walking will injure more children. Vaccines are asking us to do something altruistic, to make a choice to protect not only ourselves and our children, but also those around us. Author Eula Biss says that vaccines are one of the most empathetic things that we can do. A system that's based on people voluntarily using their bodies to protect other vulnerable people. That's something I hope we don't forget. Now, I'm a doctor, but I'm not that kind of doctor. It's natural to have questions about vaccines, and you should have a conversation with your medical professional. They want the best for you and yours. I will give you one prescription, though, and that's to subscribe so you can get a full dose of science every week. And if you want to read some amazing books about vaccines, check out Seth Mnookin's The Panic Virus and On Immunity by Eula Biss. Links in the description. Stay curious.
Okay. This is such a great video. I feel like it really breaks things down to make it easy to understand how vaccines work and why they're important. If you have any questions, or if you hear a lot of questions from parents when talking to them about their child's immunization records, put them in the chat. We have lots of school nurses and health office staff here today, and we'd love to have you kind of learn from each other. Let's see.
Today.
Okay. It is very important to keep kids healthy during respiratory illness season, kids and adults, along with annual flu shots. COVID vaccines are available for kids ages 6 months and older. And then there's an RSV vaccine available for people ages 60 plus, also pregnant women. And that is very exciting. RSV is a very big problem here in Arizona. We are heading into the winter months, and our hospitals get flooded with people with RSV. So it's fantastic we have a vaccine for that now. It's also really important that you, as nurses and health office staff, really encourage your families to stay healthy this respiratory illness season by getting flu shots, getting their COVID vaccines, and washing hands, covering their cough, all of that. Okay, so next we have a guest presenter, Gail Hawk. I was trying to remember, is it Dr. Gail Hawk? I know she has
It is doctor, yes, but I'm also a certified school nurse since 1992.
Okay.
Never let that one go, right, Nadine?
I love it. So Gail, you have a great presentation prepared for you. I'll stop screen sharing and then you go ahead and take over.
I want to thank you for the invitation, and I do want to say it was my school nurse practice. Can y'all see my screen?
Yes. Yep,
okay, good. It was my school nurse practice that led me to graduate school. It was the most challenging nursing position I ever had. All I had was my low-end Littman stethoscope, a Snoopy eye chart in my brain, and I'm sure you can all relate to that. So that's what did lead me to my advanced practice, and I just want to thank everybody for everything you do every day and for having me here today. Okay, so I want to talk about HPV-related cancer and how you can help reduce the risk. So I'm not going to go through the objectives, but I am a retired professor, so I have to have my objectives. Anyway, so human papillomavirus is a very small DNA virus. It's highly communicable. There's more than 200 types. 40 infect mucous membranes. Transmission is through close, intimate contact. I don't say sexual contact anymore. I say close, intimate contact because it's skin to skin, mucous membrane to mucous membrane, and that can happen in a lot of ways. Most infections are asymptomatic and transient, but it is incredibly prevalent. About 43 million people in the United States have either a new case of HPV or a current case of HPV, and we have 13 million new cases annually that we're aware of in the United States. So there are two different types. There's the cutaneous or the skin types, and then there are the mucosal and genital infection sites. We only have a few minutes today, so I'm going to jump through this slide to the next one. And also recurrent respiratory papillomatosis. I can talk about that if we have time later. But virtually all cervical cancer is related to HPV, and the majority of oropharyngeal cancers, back of the throat, the majority of anal, penile, vaginal, and vulvar cancers are all related to HPV. So the natural history of HPV infection, you can get infected and clear those symptoms. You clear those symptoms, you can get infected with another serotype or another type, but it's not considered cancer until, I hope you can see my mouse, until it invades the basement membrane under that top layer of mucosal tissue, which we call epithelial tissue. But it has to invade that basement membrane before we consider it invasive cancer. So again, with cervical cancer, you can get infected, it can clear, come back, you can get another serotype, it can progress, it can regress, you can get a precancer, which you may see on Pap smears or Pap testing. But once it's invasive, we call it cancer. Where's my little dot there? So oral pharyngeal cancers, many are not familiar with this, but they're at the back of the mouth, the posterior part of the soft palate. A dentist may see a lesion on the side of the tongue or in the back of the throat. There is no screening for oral pharyngeal HPV-related cancers. I've done a lot of reading on this, and there are some studies that look at the presence of HPV 16, 18. Those are the cancery ones in people's saliva, and they're finding that there may be once we can screen, I think we're going to find it's more prevalent in the oral cavity than we thought. That's just my own personal opinion. But your tonsils have a lot of bends and folds. Those are called crypts. And that HPV can get down in there and hide and avoid the immune system. So again, let me go. It does need to invade that basement membrane in order to be considered, in order to spread. So natural history of oral HPV, same thing. It can clear on its own. It may persist. We don't have a known precursor, and then again, decades later, become an oral pharyngeal cancer or back of the cancer, oral cancer. So right now, because there is no screening for oral HPV related cancers, we have more of those cases than we do of cervical cancer. So it's really important that we understand that this is risky business across the board, wherever you have a mucous membrane and if there's close intimate contact. So the common ground I always start with parents is preventing cancer is better than treating it. And I don't think you can ever get a fight with that saying. And that I thank Melissa Wharton from the CDC for using that at a conference I was at, 9 years ago. So these are the types that are in the vaccine that we use there. We use HPV-9 as Gardasil vaccine, and it impacts multiple serotypes or types of HPV, the virus. So if everybody was vaccinated, we could have the potential to prevent nearly 34,000 HPV-related cancers in the United States annually. And the reason there's a stadium here is because when you think about when you go to a big sports game or a concert, there are just, that's how many people, if you look around that stadium, you could think, oh my gosh, if everybody was vaccinated, we could prevent this number of cancers in the United States. So safety issues, this comes up frequently as well. These clinical trials had more participants than many, many other vaccines. More than 135 million doses have been distributed safely, and it has long-lasting protections. We've been following for at least 12 years, it'll be more now since the time of this writing, but with no evidence of waning or decreasing the protection. Okay, so last time I was here, we only had the NIS data, but I was able to get data from ADHS, and I have permission from the office of the immunization program office to share some county by county granular data with you. So these are the routine adolescent vaccines, as you all know, the two meningococcals. Serogroup B is not on the school schedule, and that requires a different kind of dosing and a different kind of appointment with a provider. We have Tdap, HPV, and then annual flu. And then I want you to watch for the COVID-19 addendums because one just came out. And I'm not going to speak to COVID today. We're talking about HPV. You may see records that have started at 9, and that's okay. That's the recommendation now from the American Academy of Pediatrics, and CDC allows starting at 9. We've had that for quite a while, but now there's a big push to start at 9 and finish by 11. So this is what I really am here to talk about. And I know I'm getting to the end of my time, but these are the counties. So I want you to take a look at your county. This is the granular data from ACES. It changes on a monthly basis, dependent on, a quarterly basis, depending on who's vaccinated, who's not, who's come into the age range of 13 and who's left the age range of 18. So right now, in Q1, 47% of Arizona females and 43% of Arizona males had completed the series. This is just inadequate. It's inappropriate. It's just not right. So you can look at your county and see where you are. And I see Maricopa County, we're even lower than Arizona according to the ACES data. And if we have time, we'll go back to this map. But this is what I did to show you guys. I have ranked by county the HPV completion rates for females. I looked only at females for this. And if you, okay, so the green counties, with a hats off to them, they're in the 60% range. And Apache County has the highest vaccination rate coverage for women, or for girls, I mean. And then the yellow is in the 50% coverage rate for females 13 to 18. And I just pulled the data for this one group for females to show you, but males and females, the data is available on the map. And then for Yuma, for the red, for these counties, and my county's right there, these are all in the 40% range. So on this column, these are the numbers of fifth graders that are enrolled in Arizona schools, according to the data from Department of Ed in October of just last year. Now, so what we're looking at is, if we're looking at only 40%, that means 60% of the kids in Maricopa County are unlikely. When you look at fifth graders, we're looking at that, knowing that we are leaving, what is that, 27,000? We could be leaving 27,000 children at risk for HPV-related cancers in their future. So how can you guys help? This is a real important issue for me as a cervical cancer survivor. What you can do is use your immunization screening and referral form. Always include all of the recommended vaccines. Just highlight it. It'll take it to be a 3-second intervention. And hopefully you can help me get up. I'd love to reach the goal of 80%, which is the Healthy People 2030 goal, that 80% of these 80,000 kids that are right now in fifth grade move forward in their futures with minimal risk of HPV-related cancers. And you can see how prevalent it is from the data that I presented. And I really want to thank you. I want to thank you for your school nursing practice and your health office practices. This is a picture of me 6 months before my diagnosis of cervical cancer in 1982. I was so thankful that I'd already had my children. The procedures I had may have made it so that I couldn't carry a baby to term. So glad to have my boys. And I started saying this in 2006 as a cervical cancer survivor and an immunization nurse. When we miss an opportunity for HPV vaccine, we create an opportunity for cancer. So I just want to thank you for your time. And I know I went fast, but I wanted to get it all in.
Thank you so much. Gail, we have a few extra minutes. Can you tell more about your experience with cervical cancer and how that's impacted your life?
Oh, sure. I think I'm going to go back to that map too, so people can see it with their counties. Yeah, I was, I think I was 27 years old. It was Friday night. My phone rang Friday night after business hours, and it was my OB calling me. And the first thing he said was, "Gail, I want you to sit down." My mom was there. I was making dinner for her and my kids and my husband. And he said, "I just want you to know we found cancer in your cervix and you need to come for surgery next week." And that was like just about it. That was all that, he said to me. And fortunately, I had good insurance. But I also was diagnosed at a very early stage, stage 0. We don't even capture the numbers on stage 0 or CIN3 cervical cancers. The only data that we capture is in invasive cancers. And so there are probably like 300 to 400,000 cases of stage 0 or CIN3 precancers in the United States with women annually, but we really don't know how vast those numbers are. I did have to have biopsy every 6 months through my 40s. So thank God I had great insurance, and I didn't have any recurrence. I did have some treatment in my 40s with TCA, which is like an acetic acid, a really strong acetic acid. I do know when I look back that it impacted my relationship dramatically. Cancer always does. And, I was married to a great guy. He was quite a bit older than I was. That marriage did end when I was in my 40s. And, as I look back and I work with the survivors, I see how cancer impacts a relationship, even though I was diagnosed, so thankful at such an early stage. So.
Well, thank you so much. I know you do a lot of work with national coalitions for cervical cancer, and you are always such a great advocate, and we are so lucky to have you as part of our TAPI community. There's a few questions in the chat. Let me see if we can answer them. So age recommendation used to be 11 and now it is 9. Can you explain a little bit more about why a 9-year-old is now recommended to get HPV
Sure.
vaccine?
Okay. So one thing that Macrina Leach always says, and maybe some of you know her, is that we give all vaccines before exposure to disease. So the intent with the younger we give that vaccine, it's always been allowable at age 9. I used to look to see if a kid was in a vulnerable situation, maybe in foster care or living in a group home. And then I would think, well, I'm going to give that vaccine early at 9. I'm going to start them early. So at least we get one shot in case they change foster homes or they may move away, that kind of issue. But we know we get a more robust immune response at age 9. And the earlier we give it. And then if we give it at age 9, then it is completed at when they come in at 11. Does that make sense, you guys? So that when they come in for their routines at age 11, then you give them that second shot and they're done. So we give 2 shots if we start that vaccine before age 15. And if they start after age 15, then they need 3. So 9 is to get it in early, get that great immune response, and just have them done at age 11 and 12.
And typically, you know, when the vaccine first came out, it was really focused on girls and making sure that we get HPV vaccines for girls. But is it equally important for boys to be vaccinated against HPV?
Yes, yes, because boys give it to girls, girls give it to boys, or males give it to females, and females give it to males. And so it's not discriminatory by sex. And for oral pharyngeal cancers, males are far more likely to have that cancer than females. And it's partly just because of practices, and it's also related to the male immune system. That's really complicated. I learned some stuff about that several years ago about why males are more at risk to have the oral pharyngeal cancers than females, but related to their immune systems. But it's just so important. You saw those cancers that didn't discriminate. You know, we have penile cancers, anal cancers, oral pharyngeal cancers that can all impact boys later in life.
Yes. So when I have 3 teenage boys right now, and when they turned 11, because they're a little bit older than the recommendation went down to 9. When they turned 11, they're like, oh, do I have to get any vaccines today? And I was like, yep, you're getting your vaccines today. And I said, and you get to get your HPV vaccine, which is a cancer prevention vaccine. And they were like, what? I'm like, yep, we're going to get this and prevent all kinds of cancer. And it's as simple as that. So very important. Thank you for the conversation that's going on in the chat. There is a lot of great comments. Blake said, I think it's important to rethink HPV and how it presents. It may not show, but it can still spread and cause cancer. Can you speak to that for a minute, Gail, about how it can show up years later?
Right. So yeah, it can show up years later, and everybody's immune systems are different, you know. And I was very young when it showed up in my system, but I had just come through 2 pregnancies pretty close together. We don't know how the immune system impacts, you know, pregnancy impacts the immune system. I was probably just right for, you know, the infection. What was it? Okay, so
so how HPV will
right, everybody almost, we call it the common cold of intimate viruses. It's the common cold. 90% of people will be exposed to HPV in their lifetime. 90%, that's like everybody. And most people, 90% of those who are exposed will eliminate that virus on their own. 10% of people like me will not, their immune system doesn't eliminate it. So the natural history, I'm going to go back one slide to talk about that. Here, let me go here. I left this, I went fast over the science, I know. Here, let's go here. So when we look at the natural history of HPV, and this is similar to the oral pharyngeal ones too, is that you can get infection and clearance, or you can get infection and progression of the HPV infection. And this is like over years' time, that HPV infection can progress to a precancer, and then it could regress back, and then it could be cleared. So it's kind of it's a wily virus, that's for sure. But in 10% of people, it can become an invasive cancer. And let me tell you, those treatments even the treatments that I had, they were no fun at all. Having a cervical biopsy without any kind of anesthesia or anything is not a pleasant experience. There's probably somebody in the room who has had a cervical biopsy as well and can attest to the discomfort that's involved in that. And so again, exposure can happen decades before a cancer can occur. And then you can test positive. That's why the PAP testing guidelines have changed over time, is that we were probably over treating in the beginning when we were first realized that HPV and cervical cancer had a relationship. That we didn't know about that in '82 when I had cervical cancer, but some people were getting over treatment. So the PAP guidelines have changed. And I can talk about that another time, or somebody can you guys can contact me if you have more questions.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Gail. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so let's go back to the slides. And then next we are going to hear from the Arizona Department of Health Services. Blake and Sharon are both here today. And we're just going to talk about some common questions that you may have about the IDR report, immunization data report. If you have any specific questions, this is your chance to put them into the chat and get them answered. So Blake and Sharon, kind of, describe what is the IDR? Who needs to complete it? All of that. Kind of give us a description of it.
I could go ahead and take this one. Sorry, y'all. I was planning on being out of office today, but some plans fell through, so I'm here today. So thank you, Sharon, for offering up to help and to talk about this. But I'm Blake Mayhack. Many of you probably heard me speak. Been on quite a few meetings. So the immunization data report, as you all may know, is the required survey where you enter in all of your immunization data. And how this kind of all works is basically the parents are going to come and give you, as required by law, you should request them, their vaccine records. Now, these records might be incomplete. They can come from a different state. So when that happens, you would then need to go to ACIS is a good next tool to look up your vaccinations. And from there, if they're still missing them, you could reach out to the doctor's offices, have the parents bring them in, and essentially, you guys do perform a very, very, very critical function. As school health staff, you are kind of the one-stop shop, the all-encompassing record for school-age immunizations. So it's a huge, huge public health boost that you all do. But what all this does and why we do it is it helps power a lot of the work that we do behind the scenes to help boost immunizations. It can help provide notice of schools that maybe need a little additional help, other data trends, and it just gives us a good snapshot of our community. As we've all talked about here, there's a lot that come from disease, and and as Dr. Lewis once said, disease is bad, vaccines are good. And that's a quick snapshot. I'll go ahead and answer any additional questions that come up. I know we might have a few.
And then we just have a few tips for completing the IDR if you want to go through those, Blake.
Yeah, so one thing that I think is important, and how many of you, I don't have to put it in the chat, but feel free, have referred someone to vaccination within the last couple months, and they said, I can't get vaccinated because there aren't any appointments available. From visits to doctors' offices, visits to just talking to county staff, they often do have plenty of appointments available. They just don't have them right at the start of the school year because everybody's coming in. And I think of it as like when we did the COVID vaccine rollout, everybody wanted the vaccine all at once and as early as they could get it, and they just didn't have enough availability. So if you start setting out these referrals in February, March, April, especially like kindergarten roundup, open enrollment time, putting that these records requests or updates in their next year's packets, that's going to be really important. Also, these vaccine requirements, while you only report for certain grades, kindergarten and sixth grade, they hold throughout. So another thing that says here, while I know it's about fall break for many of you, get the IDR done before fall break. You might be saying, well, if I do it now, what happens if there's a kid that I'm still working with, or it's, I don't want to submit it too early and maybe it's not the most up-to-date data. First things first, surface level, it just needs to be a moment in time snapshot. And so it's supposed to be accurate at the time you submit it. With that said, you can submit it and edit your data and your report as much as you want. So if you're like, man, this is just way too much to do at once, you can start by putting in what you have right now for your students, and then coming back to it later and adding. Or if there's a handful of students you send out referrals to, you could go ahead and hit save or even submit, and you could come back and do it. So you could hit save and submit your survey as many times as you like. As I mentioned, prep for the next year at the end of the school year. It's hard to say you couldn't find an appointment for all the months of May, June, and July. So it's really important to get ahead of these things. And there is also available to everybody to use. It generally would come from the administration level, the decision, but you could participate in the immunization education course. It's basically an online module that allows parents to receive some education. No matter what they say, it only takes an hour. It could take less if you kind of just click through it. But if you're actually paying attention and listening, it takes about an hour to get through it. And it allows schools to defer to this program rather than having the conversations. And it really helps with convenience exempting, which is parents who are just not exempting or reaching for an exemption just because they don't feel like going and making the extra effort to get the appointment. So it's very helpful to limit that kind of thing, and it takes a little bit of onus off of you all. And finally, state law supports you. That not only means that all this is required by the state law. There is one exception in the law that allows staff members who are acting in good faith interpretation of the rules to get vaccinated. Now, this doesn't mean that, you could go all willy-nilly with it, but for example, how I like to spin it is that, again, I'll say should protect you because it's not legal advice. But if you are working with a family and you're just worried about them being non-compliant, but they're going to get vaccinated in 3 weeks rather than in 2 weeks, you could let them attend school as long as they're being respectful of your time. And that's important because when people are up pressured and up against a wall, they're going to want to just go get the exemption and be done with it, even if they have to watch the course. So just do what's best and be firm. In this also is being firm with your administration too. Thank you. I'll go ahead and look at the chat.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Let's do a trivia question. Who needs to complete an IDR? So go ahead and put your answer in the chat. A, licensed childcare providers, B, schools, C, preschools, and D, all of the above. Okay, everyone is in agreement that it is D, all of the above. And Blake, just remind us at what point, what students need that IDR completed?
Yeah. So, do you mean at what ages? Yeah, so it's going to be for everybody 18 months through 5 years. And people are like, oh, well, what about the 5-year-olds that are attending kindergarten? Well, they would be counted at the kindergarten because we also do that. And now this is kindergarten for any age. If they're 4 years old in kindergarten, the immunization requirements start at age 4. So does not matter if they are 4 years old or however old upon kindergarten entry, they have to be compliant with the school age requirements, which is what I shared earlier. And then it goes through 6th grade. And then 6th grade is when we survey again. I did want to mention something that Marie there's a couple things that Marie put in here. If you want to see other states' immunization data, you could actually just Google it and and a lot of them have them. I would say it's probably I think every state has some sort of data up. There's a couple that don't have any, but almost every single state has some immunization data. I actually just recently did a little project to verify this. Now, I will say you had asked about looking into 5th graders that are turning 11. Gets us into one thing that you might have heard recently. It's a rule clarification, not a rule change, not a law change. The rule still is, and the law still is, that students should be sent a referral for their Tdap and meningococcal vaccinations at 11 years old. Now, this seems to only be a problem for Tdap, but it applies to all 11-year-old vaccines that are required for school entry. Again, that's meningococcal ACWY, the quadrivalent MenASWI, whatever you want to call it. and then your adolescent Tdap. That's all that. So how the law is written and how it was written previously and interpreted previously was upon turning age 11, they have to be compliant with the vaccine. That does kind of go in against some CDC recommendations. AZ Academy of Pediatrics had brought this issue up to us, and we just wanted, and that's just basically the rule wasn't being interpreted the way that we intended it, and how it was written, was being misinterpreted. So we wanted to clarify that the requirement has not changed. Upon turning 11, you should send those referrals, and it's expected that they are. With that said, the students should not be removed from school until they turn age 12. This basically brings us in alignment with the CDC recommendations and allows some flexibility with the pediatricians as well as your parents to get them vaccinated within those timelines. Again, it does not mean that they aren't notified or to be notified until they turn age 12, because that's just moving the goalposts, and that's way too late. But what happened was when we had it at 11 before sixth grade entry, we ended up getting students not notified at 11, and they're delaying vaccination in that regard. So you need to make sure that we're diligent in sending out those referrals when they turn 11. But guess what? That's one less conversation you need to have with the parent until they turn 12. Should maybe send out periodically some referrals for those kids as well. And yeah, those on your IDR, it will count those students who are not yet 12 as compliant. The second or third question in that section now states, instead of the under 11 is now under 12. So that will allow those students to be considered compliant on your IDR.
Awesome. Thank you. So when they turn 11, notify them that they need those immunizations, and then they have until age 12 to get those done.
And one more thing, if we're getting into it in a second, I see that it says the ADHS referral form says 15 days from notice. I'll have to go back and review the exact wording on that, but how it's always been told to me, and now it's my fourth IDR, and how it's supposed to work is that you have 5 days from notification to get the vaccine for them to kind of respond to it or receive it. And then they will have 10 days, or sorry, another 5 days from that date to get the vaccine updated, sent in, appointment scheduled, or the appointment scheduled. Then if they were to have that scheduled appointment, they would get another 5 days to get that vaccine information to you. Point being, I always say use a rule of thumb of 10 school days from the day you notification. So once you notify them and you say, or if you have that conversation with the parent, start counting 10 school days from the next day. So next day would start as day 1, then 2, and then after that 10th day, on the 11th day, you could go ahead and say, hey, you had 10 full days to get this to me. You did not. Now they should be removed or excluded.
Okay. Keep putting your questions in the chat, Blake and Sharon. Very good at responding to those. How often do we need to complete an IDR, Blake? Every year, right?
Yes. Sorry. Every year from. So the target dates, again, this is 4 IDRs, and I've hit that date all but the first time when it was the middle of COVID and I had just started. Okay. Yep. If you want to give them 15 school days, that's fine, guys. It's really not gonna make it. I mean, I think it could make a difference, but I'm just saying it's not. No one's gonna come down whether you use 10 or 15. How often do we complete the IDR? Every year on the Wednesday after Labor Day. So you have that Monday off. We give you Tuesday to come back, and then boom, Wednesday we hit you with submit your immunization data. So we're going to start that every year, Wednesday after Labor Day, and it is mandated to end on November 15th. My very first year, guess what? That was on a Sunday. And that kind of sucked for a lot of people, because that meant either they're working over the weekend or they had to do it on Friday. And that is the way it is. We are legally required to make it end that day. You might hear a parent or someone else might bring it up that there is a November 30th date on the Arizona revised statutes. That is the maximum date to which we can set it. And if you go to the Arizona Administrative Code, it is where you'll see your November 15th date. And while I'm on the topic, I might as well mention Arizona Administrative Code is kind of tells us all the details of how everything works in practice. Arizona revised statutes kind of puts requirements and limitations on us as far as what we can and can't do and what we're supposed to require. So that's why you'll often see some people bring a revised statute and we'll say, hey, no, this is actually what it means in Arizona Administrative Code. So if you are unfamiliar with how that works, again, it's a lot of jargon, but if you ever get that kind of brought up, hey, it says the 30th, but it's the 15th, just know that the code states, it needs to be done by the 15th.
And you can turn it in before the 15th. That's correct.
Yep. So if you want, there's a lot of people that the day it opens, they have their stuff ready to go and they put them in right away. You are able to save and submit it as many times as you want. And I highly recommend doing that because sometimes you have 130 kids to look through and 10 of them aren't up to date and you have all this and you're just in the mojo, in the mood. I know how my brain works. If I'm going, I want to get everything done now. So, it's fresh in my brain. You could do all of it, hit save or submit and come back to it even 2 months later if it's still before November 15th and you started on day one. You could come back and edit it and submit again.
Okay, perfect. So any school nurses or health office staff, if you have already submitted your IDR for this year, let us know in the chat. I'm curious to see what percentage of you are have already finished it. It's great. Is there a family education requirement to accompany the personal exemption form? So we talked a little bit about the exemption module, and that is a great resource to give to parents so they can learn more about vaccines and why they are important to their child. It really does depend on the administration if that is a requirement for your school. We have our school nurse, Nadine Miller from Mesa Public Schools. Nadine, tell us a little bit more about how Mesa Public Schools uses that exemption module.
So we started off with the pilot program some years ago, but we have put it into our district policy that it is part of our requirement for the exemption. It works very well. It takes a lot of the stressors off of our staffs to be the bad guys to say you can't sign this just because you just don't want to deal with this right now. But it also provides that educational piece that a lot of parents and people don't understand anymore. And I always tell my staff, it's like telling somebody you're going to have surgery and nobody tells you what the possibilities are and what your, concerns might be or what might happen. You have to have some kind of informed consent. And we know that when they just print off the form and hand it to us, it's usually for convenient purposes. It's not usually because they're well informed and they understand why kids need to be exempt. And there are reasons that kids should be exempt for different things, but an awful lot of it was just because I just don't want to deal with this right now. So making them take that class, which like Blake says, takes about 45 minutes or so, kind of made them think about it. Is it worth that to do all that? Or is it easier just to go down and schedule an appointment and get the shots? And I always tried to tell my staff too, when you're talking to them, make sure that they understand that they may need these for college, if they want to be in a dorm, or if they want to go, in the military, or if there's some other things that they, go into nursing school or medical school or something that has to have some of the requirements of those. They don't give you an exemption. You either get it or you don't get to play. So yeah. I think it's been a big help. I'm glad to see it continue. I wish it was a bigger part that made everybody do that, because I do think people sometimes are just misinformed as to why the vaccines, and we all know COVID didn't help us any by just making it all political. So those vaccines that people were willing to have kind of got lost in the shuffle.
And then on our website with the other training materials from today, we will have a link to that exemption module, so you can all use that and view it and kind of become more familiar with it.
And I think it's a great idea for people to go in and watch it. I mean, know what you're going to ask your parents to watch and see what they are. They are well done. They have great information. I think it's really important that our staffs also are informed as to what they are doing and what they're asking parents to do so that they can understand what the process is.
Yes.
Real quick, I did want to mention two things. One, is about the module. There's questions about the the course being in Spanish. As of right now, it's not in the plans to make that happen. So when that happens, we'll let you all know. But if someone is completely Spanish speaking, they should not take the course. They would just be given the regular Spanish exemption because we are, as a state, are required to give them a form that they could understand. And if they are able to understand the module, then we have to give them the other form. And then I will also say that the education module has shown to not dramatically, if you want to think it's dramatic, but it does help significantly, about 1% to 1.5% and better immunization coverage, exemptions, and about 1.5% or 2% for immunization coverage. So it really does help, and it could take a lot of the pressure off of you. And it's up to you guys to be advocates for that, and it can really help.
Great, thank you. Okay, this trivia question, many of you are answering already. I can't find a record in ACEs for my student. This means they are not vaccinated. Is this true, false, or not sure? It looks like everyone chose B, which is correct. Students may not have a record in ACEs if they have recently moved from out of state, if their provider hasn't entered the immunizations into ACEs, or if their patient record needs to be merged with another record. Sometimes there's duplicate records for the same patient. You can always contact the ACEs help desk if you need help with that. Okay, let's see the next one. Okay, so what do we do when our district is not following state law and allowing students to attend and to be registered when non-compliant and have been sent multiple referrals and phone calls? These questions are from school nurses, the ones we're talking about today. So Nadine, I'm gonna let you answer this one first. What would be the answer to this?
That's a hard one. There are things that you can provide to your administrators to say that this is state law and that it is a law and a requirement. Districts and schools, need to comply to state law. It can be a real challenge because obviously we are really struggling in a lot of schools with having kiddos in school since all the COVID stuff. It's been real hard to balance that. I will say it's important that we do our due diligence in the health offices to make sure that we've looked on ACEs, that we've either checked with the other school districts or the other places that we could try to find these kids' records. And because sometimes they're there and parents just have lost them. But at some point, I think you have to take it and dump it on your administrator and say, this is a requirement. This is what's required by state law. Sometimes you have to call whoever else might be in charge. I get a lot of calls. Sometimes I reach out to my assistant superintendent and put a little bug in their ear and say, hey, I got a school that's not providing this. Could you have a conversation with them? And we are pretty good about doing that. But it's a hard balance right now for suspending kids that are not immunized and keeping kids in school. And it's a real challenge sometimes. And a lot of our families are really struggling and have other concerns. So balancing that is hard. That's all I can say. It is law. You do have to do it. You need to push forward with your administrators that either they be suspended. School districts are required to have birth certificates and residence and all those other things. They are also required to have some type of an immunization record and help them to get them into compliance.
Yes, thank you. You can also let your administrators know that they will be held liable. They could be held liable if there's an outbreak and they're negligent in that. But that means that, of course, like there's already been the outbreak, so we want to try to prevent those outbreaks from happening in our schools. Okay. So let's see. I know that there's been a lot of questions in the chat. If you have any other questions, let us know. I would like to know what kind of questions you hear from parents. So you're reaching out to them, trying to get their immunization records. What kind of questions are you hearing from parents? Are there any that you're not quite sure how to answer, or a funny question that, maybe someone else on the training today has heard before? Feel free to put those in the chat. Okay, so there's a few more slides. I wanted to talk, we're gonna kind of skip through these because we're running a little low on time, but I love answering the questions that you all have. I think it's really great. It is very important that you know where you can find reliable resources. So know which websites, apps, books, videos are from trusted sources. This handout is available on our website, and it lists many of those resources available. So you can give this to parents and you can say, hey, the American Academy of Pediatrics is a great resource. The CDC is a great resource. And there are different books and videos, all kinds of different information. It's a great flyer to hand out. These are two of the best sites to access valid and reliable information about vaccines. So if you run into another question or you think of something after the training, these are great places to look for answers. The Children's Hospital of Philadelphia has a lot of great vaccine education resources. CHAPI depends on them a lot for different things vaccine related. And of course, the CDC website. There are a lot of great flyers and information that you can hand out to parents and things you can look up really quickly if you get a tough question. So those are great resources. Of course, you can always refer them to their doctor or medical provider to ask any other questions. CHAPI loves school nurses, and we have a school nurse webpage. It looks like this, and I will be putting this link in the email as a follow-up. But there are a lot of different resources here, both with ACES records and how to complete the IDR. There are sample communication messages for parents, immunization schedules, updated ones there. COVID information about specific vaccines. So you can go to our website there. And then this handout was developed by our coalition members. It's talking points and guidance on how to answer those tough questions. So you can, it says, is it important for my child to get vaccinated if everyone else vaccinates their child? And that kind of goes through, yes, it is. And we need that community immunity. We also have our website, CHAPI's website, whyimmunize.org. We have a lot of different resources, not just a school nurse page, but also resources, web pages for specific vaccines, things for kids, teens, adults, childcare, all of that. So feel free to go to our website. Wanted to talk for a minute about the different resources that we have. These are all flyers that can either be downloaded or which are great to include in an email to parents. I know I get a lot of emails from school nurses, and so sometimes there's attachments, you can send it that way. Or if you wanted a printed material, these are all available on our website. You can just order them and we will ship them to you for free. A lot of the resources that get used are the childhood schedules. So it says which vaccines are needed at which age. We also have a lot regarding cold and flu season, how to stop the spread of germs. This one in the bottom center, this is very popular with our school nurses. They love to hang it up in their office, and just as a reminder for people to wear a mask if you're not feeling great, cover your cough, wash your hands. That's so important in stopping the spread of disease. We also have different postcards that you can send out, reminders that it's time to get vaccinated, time to turn in those vaccine records. Also, if there's the IDR applies to, 6th grade and younger, but we also have resources for when kids are going off to college. That is a really great resource because those kids need to be protected before they go to college. And then my favorite thing to talk about is Vaccines for Children program. So if your health insurance does not cover vaccines or you don't have health insurance, you can still get your child immunized against preventable diseases with no fee. It's a federally funded program called Vaccines for Children. And you can contact your county health department for locations of where to find a vaccine for children provider. This is an amazing resource. So many people are able to use it, and we don't ever want a financial barrier between getting a child vaccinated. Thank you so much to our presenters today. That was really, really great. I love to hear all of the discussion and the great resources. Gail, thank you so much for the presentation and sharing your story. That was really important. We will have a survey to kind of talk through the training today. Your input is very valuable. We do offer this training. We will offer it again in the future. So let us know how we can improve for next time, or if you have any other ideas. We would love to hear them. If you have any questions, if you think about anything after the training or something comes up and you need an answer, I can put you in touch with any of our presenters. So feel free to email me at any time. And this is just another one of our little handouts. This one's a little brochure. Just a reminder to stay vaccinated, cover your cough, wash your hands, and everyone stay very healthy during flu season, respiratory illness season. So fill out the survey, and we will draw some names for prizes, and I'll be contacting any prize winners from the training today. Now, if you are a registered nurse, social worker, certified health education specialist, medical assistant, community health worker, we do have CEUs available for you. I will put that link in the email. Also, you fill out a short survey and talk and put in your licensure number, and then those are mailed out within a few weeks. So we have just a few more minutes. If you have any questions, feel free to stay on and we're happy to answer them. But thank you so much for attending today. We appreciate all the participation, and happy fall. Hopefully it is nice and cool where you are. Oh, great. Sharon and Blake put their contact information in the chat. That is wonderful. Thank you. I'm going to get that link for that survey real quick. If anyone is still on that would like to fill out the survey ASAP. Thanks for your help, Nadine. Do you have any last comments, or how long have you been working with schools as a nurse? Forever. You're on mute right now. Gail had said she had done it forever too, right?
I was just say, I just had my 30th.
Oh, that's great.
Forever.
Yeah, Nadine, didn't we both get our certification under the Department of Ed at first?
Probably, yes.
Yeah, and then it transitioned to.
Then they dumped us.
Yeah, but then it went to AZNA, or the Arizona State Board of
Nursing. Yeah.
Yeah, so Nadine and I met early on.
That's great.
Yes.
I love to hear about those long career connections. That's wonderful. Thank you to all.
Great job.
Oh yeah. Hi, Sharon.
Hi, can I just make one quick comment about something Gail had put in the chat? Yeah, and I'm Sharon. I'm a public health nurse at the Arizona Department of Health Services Immunization Bureau. And the clarification extending the time to age 12 up until they turn 12 for the adolescent vaccines. And as Blake had mentioned specifically for the Tdap, we hope that that will be a win-win-win-win-win for everybody, because it will give the parents, the students, the administrators time for everyone to get their vaccines. And this was motivated by the healthcare community, the pediatricians specifically, that, we were requiring them to be taken out of school 2 weeks after they were notified after age 11. So we're hoping that this will give everyone time to be compliant and not to be excluded from school. And so we're going to see how that works, but hopefully it will work well for everyone. So that's one of the reasons why that was responded to. Thanks.
Thank you so much. And we do want kids in schools. That is the best place for them. We want them learning and growing and not having to worry about getting those immunization records in. So if we learned anything from virtual school, I had a kindergartner trying to do virtual school in 2020, and that was very difficult for her and for me and for the classroom. And yeah, we want kids in schools. Okay, I think that's it.
I was just going to say, we hope that's going to result in less exemptions out of necessity, out of frustration. So hopefully we'll see what happens. We'll wait for the data to inform us, but thanks.
It would have been really nice if they, instead of putting an age on it, they would have just put a grade level due on it, because boy, it's really hard to find 11-year-olds and have that big span. And it's hard too that we send things out at 11 and then we go, well, you don't really do till 12, because it does make it really challenging to keep tracking those kids and finding them. So it's been a little bit of a challenge. And when it came out kind of in the later part of the summer, a lot of people had already started school and things were already kind of in place. So it was a little tricky.
We've heard that. We've heard that feedback, and we're really just trying to do our best.
Mention that when I that's why I had mentioned some of the background history on this. The students, when we put an age requirement on it, they were getting notified. If we put an age requirement, some of those kids are 10, some of those kids are 11, some of those kids turn 12 by 6th grade. So by putting an age requirement, you aren't really notifying students when they become available. And this just kind of, in a lot of our eyes, the sweet spot to where you could say, hey, I could look at, I'm going to notify them when they are able to get it, when it's required, and I'm not going to punish them for waiting within recommendations. So it's kind of finding that sweet spot. I know there's going to be some issues and some frustrations this first year, but I think in the long run, it will be very beneficial.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. So I know I have a couple of younger grades that they didn't finish their DTaP series, and then they get like a Tdap at the age of 7 or 8. So come around, they turn 11. I'm assuming not due to get that Tdap because of the year that has to go by, or do they still get that 11 or 12-year-old Tdap?
It's a great question. And we have a flow chart in our materials because it can be very tricky, as all the school nurses, especially the ones who have been school nurses for a long time, know. If you do have any questions about a specific student, you can always call us, and we would be happy to walk you through that, because it is sometimes very challenging to determine when that child should get their next Tdap.
And Sharon, if you want to email that to me, I can include it in the materials that I send out to everyone, so we can get that flow chart.
Great. Send Sharon an email about that, and she can redirect it to our clinical team, and we can answer those questions for you.
Thanks, Marie.
Did you already put that document in the chat earlier?
Put the link to the website.
Link.
Yeah.
Does it have the flow chart in it?
It's all of our. I put the link to all of our requirements.
So you beat me to it earlier. So it should already be in there, Laura.
Okay.
That has our yes.
I'll include that then.
Yeah, and there is a catch-up schedule that and it can be like a shell game sometimes trying to figure it out, but yeah, we can definitely help with that.
Okay, perfect. Well, I think that's it. So thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for all the presenters today helping, and thank you especially to all of our school nurses and health office staff for keeping our schools and our kids and communities healthy. We really appreciate you. Have a great day, everyone.